you have a phone, you don't mind silencing your phone. That's one of the things we learned. So silence your phone, we don't want to hear all the alerts that come through. Don't want to hear your ringtones, you might get to start dancing and all. So silence your phones for us. And we have two microphones. We have a microphone right here where I'm standing. This would be to ask questions. And then there's another microphone over here to ask questions and make comments when that time comes. What we ask of you with the comments is to keep those 2 minutes or less. We have a community engagement team. We're going to introduce our outreach team in just a moment. And they're the ones that are going to follow up with you. That's very important because we need people to be respectful of one another's time. We also need to be respectful of the building that we're graciously able to be in. And we have to be out of here at a certain time. So we want to be respectful of that. So if you can please keep your comments to a minimum and give a synopsis. Our outreach team is going to connect with you right after you make your comment, and you're going to get follow-up on that. One thing that I've also learned over the course of this business is people give me the DUI when somebody keeps talking, and they want me to cut them off. So let me smile all night and not have to be the bad guy cutting anybody off, all right? So appreciate you guys, but I want to introduce Ms. Debbie Risper before we get to the councilman and county executive. And she's in charge of our outreach team, and she'll introduce all of them here in just a second.
Good evening. Come on, everyone.
Hi, Debbie.
Good Wednesday evening to everyone. My name is Debbie Risper, and I have the awesome responsibility of overseeing the Community Engagement Office. And it begins here with you. We have an awesome team ready to assist you in connecting and strengthening the community ties. Will my team come up, please? We have Brad here, Michelle, Carmen, Anne Marie, Nancy, Charles, and Mary is in the back. But we are all here to assist you this evening. There will be someone positioned at each microphone to get your information. And if you don't finish there, they'll see you in the back to get all of your information because we're here for you. Without further ado, let's start this party tonight.
And once again, state your name and what community you're coming from once the microphone when an opportunity presents itself. And again, if you can, just limit your comments, that's for time purposes only. And thank you all for coming out. Now, this is like the Timonium area that we're in, and I know we represent many different neighborhoods. We've had a community that I thought was the best so far. I'm not going to say which one it is, but I think Timonium is going to be even better. So let's have a good night. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Councilman Hatch for some introductions.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate all of you coming this evening. It's certainly cold enough out, that's for sure. I just want the county executive to know that this is the largest district geographically in Baltimore County. It's larger than Baltimore City, the land area. And we have people who have come from near the Pennsylvania line, near Harford County, Carroll County, down to the Beltway. So people have come long distances, and as I well know, being all over the district, whenever I try to talk on the cell phone when I'm driving the car, and I can tell you every road in northern Baltimore County where the cell goes dead and exactly where it goes dead. But again, I appreciate you being here. I want to introduce elected officials that are here this evening, and I want to thank them so much for coming this evening. And I very much look forward and do work with our elected officials. And we have Delegate Michelle Guyton here. And she's just the wrong party. No, I'm only kidding, only kidding. But, so we have Glenn Resnick, who is the president of Walker County Volunteer Fire. Stand, Glenn. Lisa Moore, executive director of the Valleys Planning Council. The fair, we have Gary Brewster, who is in the back, and I want to thank the state fair for hosting this event. It's very, very nice of you and very good to our community. And I'd like to say that over the last 5 years that I've been in the county council, I have seen a lot more cooperation and working between the fair and the community, which is exactly what needs to happen. I want to introduce my staff, and in the back we have Joanne Kozak. I'm sure many of you talked on the phone with her, and we have Ryan Freed, Roger Yeager, whose wife worked for me for 23 years when I was in the state legislature. And my wife, Evelyn, is most of you know, I have a email list of about 34,000 people. And I asked the people in the 3rd District to let me know which issues are important to you and what issues need to be corrected or resolved in our county. And the response was overwhelming. And then last Friday, I sent out a list, and I think we have like 25 new concerns that have not yet appeared on the summary. And I want to present them to the county. I don't think that's too much to ask, is it? No. Okay, good. You heard it. You got it. I just want to quickly go over what issues. I just want to summarize very quickly. We have the issue of replacing high schools, Delaney Towson, regarding Lock Raven. I don't really know where that's headed, whether it's a replacement, addition, or renovation, whatever. We have the issue of traffic calming, which so many of you are asking for. Environmental issues, many environmental issues. Screening, when there's a county facility and somebody who have to look out the window and see something ugly, they would like to see screening. Let's see. Police presence. Now let me just tell you, the 7th precinct covers most of the 3rd district. And we have the lowest crime rate in Baltimore County by far, the lowest. But that doesn't mean that we can sit back and take it for granted. One of the things we do need is we need a police substation in northern Baltimore County, because when people call, when there's an emergency, it takes like a half hour for them to get there. We have requests for public water and storage. Regarding our wonderful volunteer fire companies, some of them really need the buildings to be replaced or remodeled, specifically Jacksonville for renovation, and Upper Cove and Glendon for replacement. We have maintenance of county facilities, broadband for northern Baltimore County. That continues to be a very, very important issue. Recreational facilities, northern Baltimore County has zero, none. The Rec Council spends $63,000 a year renting facilities all over the county and in neighboring counties. We need a senior citizen center and rec facilities, especially in northern Baltimore County. And we have many roads that need repaving. And last but not least, regarding animal control, we need to have this administration, which I know they are, work very closely with the Animal Advisory Committee. So I wanted to say a few words about our county executive before I introduce him. First of all, I don't think Senator Brochin or Delegate Allman are here, but I want to thank them for their 16 years of service to this district. And so I served in the House of Delegates with the county executive for 8 years. We sat next to each other on the House floor. At the beginning, I was able to tell him how to vote. And he was okay. He was okay. Then, sometimes he did go off the reservation, but I had to explain everything to him, what the bills were about, and tell him how to vote. So, which isn't that good? So, right. But anyhow, the county executive is a Democrat, I'm a Republican. We would do bills together, and we'd either call them the OK bills, which are Olszewski-Catch, or the KO bills, Catch-Olszewski. So obviously, OK isn't quite as good as the KO, but knockout versus a question about it. But I want to introduce our county executive, who I can assure you is a very good man. And his goal is to make our county government open and transparent. And everything that he's done really is centered on making this government open, so that when you call, you will get a response from the county. No longer will you be ignored. No longer. And he's also opened up great dialogue with members of the county council. And in the past, many of the decisions regarding roads, et cetera, were made for political reasons. This county executive will base decisions on merit, not politics. And please clap for that, because that is a major change. So I have the honor of welcoming our county executive, John Olszewski, Jr.
Hope to be an okay county executive. Thank you, Councilman Catch, for joining me tonight. It really has been fun to get reconnected with someone who spent so much time serving alongside the state legislature, and I want to say your councilman has been a fierce advocate for some of the reforms, quite frankly, that we're now embarking upon to make county government more open, more accessible, more transparent. It's important we do that because at the end of the day, this is your government. And the thing that we're learning is that culture change takes time, but we're committed to it. We're committed to making this a government that is for you and with you. So if along the way you aren't being responded to, let us know. If there are frustrations, let us know, because This is about service to you, and this is about meeting the needs of our communities. And I will say that I know the councilman had just had a list, but in fact, just a few days ago, he literally gave me the list that was emailed out to that listserv in terms of many of the concerns of District 3 residents. And I want you to know we take it very seriously. And it's my charge to try to get as many of those items checked off over these next 4 years as possible. And we joke that if I got all of them, I said, would I be one of the better county executives? You'd be the best county executive ever. So we'll try to go from okay to the best. But this night is about you. So what we're trying to do is, in these series of town halls, is to present a little bit of information about the status of the county, where we are, what we're facing, some of the challenges ahead. But then this is really about listening to your concerns and sort of addressing your needs. So we're going to spend just about 20 or so minutes running through the same presentation we give everywhere else, and then the floor is yours tonight. So again, thanks to Gary and the State Fair for hosting us and being such great hosts, and we look forward to the conversation. So, I ran for county executive because I want to build a better Baltimore County, and for me that means making smart investments in line with the needs and the desires of our communities. That's the what. But as the councilman mentioned, the how matters too. How we actually do those things, how we engage, the accountability, the transparency of our budgeting, of our governing, really matters a big deal. So just for context, we had a requirement, we had testimony over the past 2 years before the budget was finalized. We would do there was one opportunity for public testimony before the council finalized their budget. Over the last 2 years, if you've been to a town hall before or seen me speak, no cheating here, but does anyone know or want to take a guess how many people testified on the county budget over the last 2 years? Three? Zero? Close, yeah. 2. There were 2 people last year, and there were 0 people the year before. And I think the fact that you are all here tonight is a testament to the interest of authentic engagement, where you know that it actually matters, that you're a part of that, and know that just by virtue of being here, and those of you who are going to share your perspectives and your priorities, you're shattering those records. And that sort of gets to the culture change. It's about the kind of county we want to live in. We believe that a budget is the most important expression of our values. That's why we want to engage you, because this is about our shared values and our shared priorities. So let's start with just a sort of an overview of what our budget looks like, and where we get our money, how we spend it. The current fiscal year, which is fiscal year 2019, we're expected to take in about $3.6 billion. Of that money, it comes from 3 primary sources, 3/4 of which comes from the property tax, income tax, and the state aid from the state of Maryland. In addition to those 3 sources, we bring in money also from fees for service like permits and restaurant inspections. We receive federal aid for things like education and transportation. And then we also have some service fees on hotel, motel, and public utilities. Just to call out a couple of things, this is just sort of FYI and informational. Our current property tax in Baltimore County has been it's $1.10 for every $100 of your property value. Our income tax is 2.83% of your income, and then we get about $814 million from the state. So that's where the money comes from. The next thing is about where the money goes. This is all the operating budget. This is the year over year. You build a budget out like a family. Money comes in, money goes out. We'll talk about the capital budget next, which is more of the bricks and mortars and the infrastructure spending. So in the capital year-to-year spending, probably unsurprisingly, nearly half of all of our money goes to our schools. Over $1.7 billion of the county budget goes to schools. That's followed up by public works and public safety in terms of our largest investments. There's a non-departmental slice that 8% is about $284 million. Those are things where we pay for health insurance for employees and their families, as well as pension pension benefits for retired teachers, first responders, and the like. There's also a piece right next to that 8% called debt service. It's like one of the pink slices. It's about 127 million, and this sort of intersects with the capital budget. So we pay, in this current fiscal year, we're paying $127 million of our budget to pay down debt that was taken out in the past to do things like build new schools and put air conditioning in our schools, which we'll talk about in a second. So let's talk a little bit about the capital budget, which is sort of the bricks and mortars, our schools, our water and sewer. Where that money comes from, two primary sources. The first of which are general obligation bonds. Now, general obligation bonds are those that you vote on every November. So every 2 years, these are the borrowing authorizations that you give county government. And we pay those back through the general fund, through that thing called debt service. And the more we borrow, the more we're paying back in debt service year over year through the annual budget. We also have a Metro District Fund, and those are bonds that are repaid by revenue that's generated from water and sewer fees. Now that's called an enterprise fund. It is self-sustaining. Basically the way that fund operates is the fees for water and sewer have to match the costs of the infrastructure for our water and sewer investments. So unsurprisingly, where that money comes is effectively where it goes. We spend our biggest piece of capital construction dollars towards water and sewer infrastructure and upgrading that. And the next biggest portion are invested in our schools. Now, these pie charts are important and they're helpful, but they only sort of tell part of the story, and they really don't speak to some of the challenges that we're going to be facing here in Baltimore County in the years ahead. So let's start with our schools. Over the past several years, since 2011, Schools for the Future was a $1.6 billion program that was meant to eliminate overcrowding in elementary schools, modernize the schools in greatest need, and make sure that all of our schools had air conditioning. 59 were air conditioned, 16 new schools were built, and additions to 12 more were still put in. Here for the 3rd district, 6 schools were air conditioned. There were additions at 5 of our elementary, middle, and high schools. And then we also have 3 new schools that were in the queue, including the new Mays Chapel Elementary School. Now that work was a 10-year plan. It isn't done. While we've completed 75 projects, we still have 6 more that are currently underway and 8 more that are still in planning and design. To finish this program, it's going to cost Baltimore County about another $600 million. Now that's sort of important because the way this program was structured was the timeline that was originally delivered to residents sort of presupposed that as we got to the end of this program, Baltimore County was going to be able to pay both the state portion as well as the county portion. And the state typically gives us about $45 million a year. And to stay on that schedule, we would have had to either forward fund that money or have the state accelerate its contributions to help us out. We'll talk about that later on tonight. What I learned very early on was both from the operating side as well from our debt capacity side, is that we simply don't have the resources to be paying both sides of that equation, especially with no promise from the state that we were going to have that money reimbursed if we put the forward funding out there. So what does that do if we don't have the state commitment? It actually slows down what communities were promised. So all of those schools we talked about in the program in terms of slowing down delays and renovations, and you can sort of see the schools that are in yellow. There are several schools that we've pushed out up to 4 years because we have to wait for that state money to come in. And that actually then pushes out, unfortunately, all the high schools beyond the Schools for the Future. So under the sort of what was originally promised, we could have started planning for the high schools and then began on them under the fiscal 22, was when the Schools for the Future would have been funded and ended. Without the state support, that program was pushed out 4 additional years, making it harder, much harder to also then tackle the high schools. So what I've done is we leveraged our time in the legislature, and I went down, talked to Delegate Guyton and the entire Baltimore County House and Senate delegation, and And we asked for the state to step forward with $100 million a year for the next 5 years so that we can both stay on time for our elementary and middle schools and our air conditioning projects, get that done by fiscal 22 as was promised to our communities, and to get moving on the high school projects, which I know are a critical need here across Baltimore County. So that's just our schools. So we also have this thing about retiree health care. It's called OPEB, Other Post-Employment Benefits. It provides the health and life insurance to those who retire from Baltimore County. We have an obligation to pay to people who have been long-standing employees. What's happened, though, over the past few years, our county has effectively, we decelerated funding the liability. Until this year, we almost stopped it entirely. So while the cost of OPEB in Baltimore County this year is about $100 million, we only put $5 million towards it. So as we've been drawing down our spending there and putting that money towards other priorities in the county, quite frankly, we've been drawing down what has been sort of the stability fund. So as it stands now, the fund has about $385 million in assets and $1.9 billion in long-term liabilities. So that 385 was actually lower this year than it was last year because the county had to pay out $100 million from the fund, and we only put $5 million in general operating funds towards it. So we actually saw a net loss of about $95 million towards that. So if we don't start ramping up our contributions towards the healthcare liabilities, we'll see that fund completely drawn down in 2 years. So we have to start putting money towards the healthcare liabilities. Just some other issues that we're facing in the years ahead. We have a 2005 federal consent decree. The federal government basically said, Baltimore County, you have to stop having raw sewage flowing into our rivers and our streams and our bay. We borrowed $268 million last year to start investing in our wastewater treatment, and we're programmed out between now and 2023 to invest another $700 million to come out from that federal consent decree. We also have a legal obligation to reduce runoff into the bay. Stormwater remediation is an obligation to keep our what's called MS4 permits, which allows us to keep constructing buildings and schools. We had a fee to help supplement some of those costs. We repealed that back in 2017, which cost the county about $24 million a year. What we've done to help meet the need is we've actually taken some of those metro funds, the water and sewer, and we've started paying the stormwater fees out of that. So it's meeting the technical requirement, but that's $24 million less that we're able to invest in the water and sewer infrastructure. Probably unsurprisingly, as we've sort of grappled with these growing population and growing needs, the county's sort of been forced to prioritize their workforce. And so what we've seen over the past 3 decades is we've had a population grow by about 20% to over 830,000 people. At the same time, over those same 30 years, our general government workforce, people who do the trash, people who do the streets, the snow plowing, the permit processing, the code enforcement, that's dropped by about 25%. So population's up 20, general government workforce is down 25%. At the same time, there's actually been a prioritization where we've actually grown our public safety workforce by 16%, and we've grown our school workforce by almost 50% over those same 30 years. And what that means is that 77%, almost 8 out of every 10 Baltimore County employees works in either public safety or education. So these cost drivers that we've sort of run through leave us at sort of an interesting inflection point here in Baltimore County where the 2019 budget is balanced, but that's not something that's going to happen in the years ahead. So we have a long-term structural deficit driven by some of these costs in education, some of these healthcare, retiree costs, and some of the other needs. And so the budget that we're crafting, you may have heard this before, for next fiscal year, fiscal 2020, that starts on July 1st, we're already $81 million short in terms of having a balanced budget. So, like any family, there aren't a whole lot of options in terms of, you can't continue to draw down your 401k and your savings. So one option would be take our savings and draw it down. That won't last very long, and frankly, it's not really a sustainable path. So we have to really start thinking about what we do in the years ahead. Some of the bond rating agencies have seen these trends and have sort of talked about their concern about the loss of our AAA bond rating. Baltimore County is one of a few dozen local jurisdictions that's rated with the highest rating in terms of fiscal management. And they see these trend lines, and they said, we're concerned that we see that this isn't a sustainable path forward for Baltimore County. What makes this really sort of daunting to me is that that gap of 81 million does not include the costs of brand new high schools, does not include the cost of teacher pay raises, which is something that's important to me, the expansion of pre-K programs, or frankly, any of the raises or increases that we're hearing about in the news about the Baltimore County school budget. So what was originally proposed by the superintendent was an increase of about 90 million. So if that budget were to come over, we would then have an $80 million gap on top of a $90 million request. And again, we still wouldn't be addressing any of the school needs on top of that. So just perspective. Because I think it's important that we want to make those investments. There are lots of places where I've heard over the past 2 years and through these town halls where investments are needed and warranted. Whether that is our high school infrastructure investments. There was the SAGE policy group that found that we need to have a plan to address the overcrowding, the 1,700 seats that we need to have built or identified for the years ahead. We're talking over $600 million additional dollars under any number of those scenarios to make those needs met. We have infrastructure needs to resurface our roads, to upgrade our 911 system and our community colleges and other institutions. As I said earlier, I'm a big believer of investing in our people. And as we look at things like teacher wages, we actually have among the lowest average teacher salaries of all the big jurisdictions in Maryland. All but two have higher average starting salaries. We're lower than the state average. And what's interestingly is if you look over to the far right, you see Montgomery County and Howard County have the highest average teacher salaries, which coincidentally, they also happen to be the top performing school districts in the state. Quite frankly, they match up against a lot of school systems in the country. Where we all are now does not address the need for early childhood education and pre-K. Another important thing in mind, because I know that students who have access to quality early childhood have higher earnings, they commit fewer crimes, they're more likely to hold a job, and they're more likely to graduate than those who don't. So we talk about making these upstream investments so that we talk about concerns about crime, we talk about job and economic development. These are all investments that can help with that down the road. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we've got some great programming in places like our community college with the College Promise program. And we want to expand that because we know that when people have access to things like their community college, they actually are more likely to stay. Over 90% of graduates of CCBC actually stay in the Baltimore region. And on average, they actually make more than $10,000 a year than those who just have a diploma. So we also hear a lot about the need to do more to address the opioid epidemic in Baltimore County. We have the second highest rate of overdoses in the entire state of Maryland. We have some sustainability needs in Baltimore County, everything from our 232 miles of shorelines to the need to do more for agricultural preservation in northern Baltimore County. We've had record rainfall and flooding. Investing in a sustainable future is really important to us. There is a legal agreement that Baltimore County has to invest more to find ways to do more affordable housing. We hear a lot about the rec and park space, and the councilman mentioned in his remarks to start that we don't have any real field space in northern Baltimore County, and so finding a way to make those investments, other quality of life things like our senior centers, public safety, hiring more officers, police substations, bike lanes, making them walkable, making communities drivable, taking full advantage of the beauty that is our county. And so, as we try to say, we've got tough budget times, we have a lot of things that we want to invest in, How do we get there? The answer is we don't know entirely yet. Part of it is about pulling you all into the process. Part of it is creating a process and a commission where people are taking a hard look at our numbers and our finances and making recommendations. And so what I did on the first day in office when I was sworn in, I left the inauguration, I went to my desk and I signed an executive order to create a budget commission on fiscal sustainability. They are charged with taking a top-to-bottom look at all of government. And they've been given a charge that there are no sacred cows, there's nothing off the table. We'll look at everything and just give us some honest feedback about what we can do better. Now I expect we'll get probably as much good news as bad news, or bad news as good news. But again, it goes back to that, just being transparent about where we are and where we're going. In addition to the Budget Commission, I've already conducted or tasked my staff to establish an RFI to have a county-wide performance audit to make sure that we are getting every efficiency and identifying any wasteful practices. I recently submitted, to the County Council a proposal to create an Office of Ethics and Accountability, effectively and completely independent, for lack of a better term, Inspector General, who is completely independent from me and from the council, has full authority to review our books and documents. So if there's any concerns about wrongdoing or waste or fraud in county government, they're able to fully investigate that. I'd also say that, it was almost 20 years ago, and Baltimore City was way ahead of the curve when they established a city staff program to track outcomes. Well, it's 20 years later, and we're way behind the curve. We don't have any sort of meaningful way to track outcomes, to measure progress, or quite frankly, for me to report to you in how we're making out any number of metrics. And so, as we're trying to make these investments, we want to make sure we're tracking them and sharing with you that we're actually delivering the results that you expect and that you deserve. We also leave a lot of money on the table in Baltimore County. We don't aggressively pursue grant opportunities like we should. We don't partner enough with public nonprofits, with private sector companies. I think there's a lot of opportunities to do more. And so we've also just tasked our department heads to move forward and try to find ways that we can identify programs that have outlived their purpose, that they can collaborate to eliminate redundancies, and frankly to say some programs might be nice, but if they're not serving the core function of delivering results for our residents, we might have to take a hard look at them. So what's next is we're actually in the process of conducting these town halls. We want to have feedback about your thoughts on the budget process. I'm responsible for introducing my first budget to the county council, so Councilman Cash and the rest of the council will have that from me on April 15th. They will work through it, have hearings, and work with you, and they have an obligation to approve a budget by May 31st. But in the process, in addition to your attendance here tonight, you have a role to play. Please, we've established an ideas@baltimorecountyMD.gov email address. We've got some great ideas that we're actually looking at and or executing already. Please keep sending them. And know that what happens in Annapolis over these next 90 days or I guess 45 days, is really important. And if we can get the commitment from the state of that $100 million for 5 years, or even something resembling of it, it will give me a lot more flexibility to keep moving forward with our school construction needs, so that we can finish schools for our future and meaningfully start planning for the high schools across Baltimore County. So with that, I'm going to invite the councilman to come back up. We're going to open the floor. It's yours. We're here to listen, and TJ can welcome everybody up and give some instructions, but we're here to have you. So thanks for listening.
Okay, the time is now going to be yours. I want to recognize Delegate Shelley Hillman, who's in. Yes, she came in. Appreciate that. Anyone else make it in? I know we started probably at 6:29. So with that being said, if you want to grab a spot in line here, and remember we said about 2 minutes. Don't want to buzz anybody.
Let me just very quickly say, very quickly say that, first of all, I've worked closely with the administration suggesting significant budget cuts. The main one is really the school system stat program. And we can cut that program and not negatively affect them at all. There's no reason why every elementary school student in this county needs an individual computer. So that's really the situation. And secondly, when you leave, there's a summary of all, well, not all, most of the issues that you contacted me about. The list is still being worked on. In fact, it's a working copy and there's boxes on it, and the boxes don't really belong there, and we're still trying to generate the list with about 25 additions.
Okay, hi, my name is Robert Boone. I'm representing Spring Lake and Coachford. I'll talk fast, but I'm not sure I'm going to make 2 minutes, but I'll do my best.
You also brought
Yeah, I brought a cheat sheet. I'd like to give you some feedback first. It's positive feedback. Spring Lake has a reforestation project that will save the county mowing and maintenance money in 2 large areas. And Lee Phillips and Carrie Holzer in that branch came out on the weekends, met the community. One of them came out, she was so sick, she should have stayed in bed. They were transparent, they were customer service oriented. We were really happy. They should be commended. I'd like to commend Keith Link. As you know, we disagree with Keith on the issue of Girdwood Road, but he responded to every email within 5 minutes, every phone call. He was professional, he was pleasant, he was service oriented, and I think he's to be commended, agreeing or otherwise. Barry Williams, who's always been open and responsive concerning our pond, which, as you probably heard, is another issue. I would like to thank our councilman, who's the best. Without him, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have our stop sign on Girdwood. As I told you, Wade would put the statue on the community anytime, and the same to Ryan and Joanne in your office, who've been tremendous. I would like to thank you. Excuse me, I've got some allergies. I want to thank you for trying to right this ship towards more open, transparent, and customer service oriented. I'd like to thank you for what you're trying to do with the 5 high schools. It's not easy. Every high school, every community wants their school. We've got to have the state money. Please let us know how we can help you get it. But you're doing the right thing. 5 years in a row, 5 schools give us the money. We'll get it done. It's the only way you can approach it. So I would like to thank you for the stop sign in Girdwood. As you know, we had a pretty tragic accident there this past summer. I didn't get emotional if I tried to talk about it. It was horrible. And Girdwood Road gets 6,000 cars a day. It's a little community road, 1 lane each way, houses on either side, cars parked. We had the second car in 2 weeks swiped by a driver. Folks use their phone apps. And when they're coming from 83 to York Road, Padonia, they go east. And when they're coming from Delaney Valley and Hot Springs, northern Baltimore County and Harford County, they go west out to 83 to go to DC. They're going to work, they're in a hurry, they're coming home, they're in a hurry. And their app tells them Girdwood Road. 6,000 cars a day, it's better than a car a second. The road wasn't meant to handle it. At the top of the road, there's a sudden daring and left turn, they miss it. The tree there has pieces of car in it. We have 3 cars that have left and gone over the grass in the last couple of weeks. We got photos of full-size tractor trailer who it followed us after and went down the road the wrong way. Actually, I think it's happened because the road, the brain took him down the wrong way. But at any rate, it's an ongoing issue, but this stop sign is really helpful. We're asking for a couple of other things in terms of that. One is the extension of Padonia Road. 6,000 cars a day is going to forever be a problem. We need the volume cut down. I understand that's a major budget issue. Just if you can do anything to start forward funding of it, to start the process, so the can doesn't keep being kicked, so the volume can be taken away from the road. We're very concerned about the 6,000 cars. If you fix Girdwood Road and they start turning into Spring Lake and go past Pot Spring Elementary and our community pool, we don't want 6,000 cars in front of the elementary school. So we'd like the funding of an independent traffic study. Let us be the model for independent traffic study and let somebody in our community work with it. I'm going to talk fast, I'm almost done. And we're asking for a traffic choking island on Padonia Road to protect the students there. And we're asking for a couple of things for our pond, a little bubbling underwater. It's a big impact on the property values, and that meets the tax base, so these things could pay for themselves. We appreciate you taking a look at them, and they're throwing me out now, but thank you all for understanding.
Thank you. We will follow up, as I said earlier. I just wanted to say that that meeting at Hot Spring Elementary, that, during the campaign, that was the hardest thing I think I did the entire 2.5 years of running for office. And I hope that I never have to sit through that as county executive. I'm sure that those things will happen, but the heartache and the hurt in that room, like, is real. And whatever we can do to help work with the community, we want to do that. So thank you for your advocacy.
Hi, good evening. I'm Stephanie House, and I live as far north in Baltimore County as you can get. I'm the last exit off of 83. Wait. Actually, what I'm going to thank everybody, I hope. So I'm going to add to that because I don't think north of Hunt Valley, we don't have as many people. We don't have the density. However, the traffic for the roads that are up there, those roads were never built. 83 was never built. The problem that I'm seeing is that because 83 is now a parking lot, and don't get me wrong, traffic issues are everywhere around the county. 695 is difficult, I get it. 795, people coming in, I get it. But what's happening is that people are, trying to avoid myself. I get off, I don't drive on 83, I take all the back roads. 2-hour commute. I live right at the line, I work in Baltimore County, and I drive 2 hours a day, 1 hour down and 1 hour up. So what I want to suggest is, again, north of, I get it, but the problems many people might know is that we have all the people that are coming in from Pennsylvania. And all I'd like to say is maybe that a study could be done for one, at Chelan. We've got 4 lanes going into 2, heading north. Every day backed up. Accidents just everywhere. Perhaps the Pennsylvania drivers that work in Baltimore County and probably Baltimore City could be charged a commuter tax and use that money. I will, but they don't vote. They don't vote in Baltimore County and they don't vote in Maryland. And all I'm saying is I understand. I understand finances. We're not as mighty in numbers up there, but 83 cannot take that traffic. And if you could get 83 maybe even better than all the people going in all the side roads, get back on 83, and then some of those issues would end on the side and back roads. That's just my thought. And thank you for everything too. Everybody that thank you.
When I was the delegate for Northern Baltimore County, that was forever, this whole problem of I-83, 10 years ago, there were 16,000 trips from Pennsylvania a day. You can imagine what it is. That it must be high. And the problem was that, and is, people from Pennsylvania trying to avoid 83, let's say they'll take Bond Avenue where the speed limit I think is 30 miles an hour, and they're going 60 miles an hour. And, we had problems with Tasty Cake, with Utz, etc. So what I've done periodically is there's a lot of people in Baltimore County that are watching for me, and they call me up and they say, well, at 5:45 in the morning on this date, the Utz potato chip truck was traveling 60 miles an hour. I call Utz, they talk to their driver, it works for a while, and then you have to do it again. So please help in that regard. And I-83 is scheduled for 3 lanes, but not any time in the near future. And that is a state road, and as far as a tax on those people who live in Pennsylvania and work in our county or state, what's going to happen is Pennsylvania will slap a tax on our residents who work up there. And it was a real problem in Western Maryland, but that was resolved in West Virginia, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Maryland, charging each other taxes for people who lived in another state and worked there. No, I appreciate it. I just, you know, I've also heard, let's do a toll on 83. And,
Okay, hi, I'm Mia Walsh. I'm the president of Cromwell Valley Park Council. I spoke to you at the last meeting regarding something with David Marks knew well about. This is just a couple of things that have come up, especially with the change in administration in the Recs and Parks. So Cromwell Valley Park has been short-staffed for quite a long period of time. And this week, our park manager has been given additional responsibilities as the chief naturalist for all of the nature centers in Baltimore County. So we're losing half of him right now because of the change in management. And it could be temporary, it could be long-term. However, we, this past fall, had to cut half of our field trips because we didn't have the staffing to accommodate all of the school children. And education is a huge part of what we do, and we do it inexpensively, free for the public schools. And so it was in the request that we had with Wade, but we really do need to address our lack of staffing. We come, I don't ever ask for anything more than what we need. We're a very autonomous council, very strong in environmental education and ecology and all of those things. And we do a great job of finding our own funding for our projects. But there are two things which the county is responsible for that we can't do without you. One is the mowing of our old growth fields. And we have over 200 species of birds that in the spring need to have their habitat restored. And the lack of mowing, we haven't been mowed in 2 years because of the other responsibilities for the mowing for the rec centers, which is also very important. But we're at a critical period right now where if we're not mowed by April, then our habitat and the spring babies that come up are not going to have their habitat. I don't think it's a big deal. I think it's maybe 2 days with getting your massive mowers out there, but there is a time crunch. So that's one thing that we really, really need. This is a silly little thing as well, but our entrance sign was vandalized in November. We have no entrance sign, and people drive by the park constantly. That should be a simple fix by the county. I mean, it's a foam board that's made to look like wood. I don't understand why it's taken 3 months to have that replaced. Finally, we have a great historic landmark architecture in our park. And we personally have raised over $700,000 to restore our lime kilns, which are absolutely stunning. And you all did an amazing job with our landmark Sherwood House, which was really lovely. I mean, amazing job with restoration of the roofing and all the woodwork. And that was just finished in December, and the county property management just did an amazing job. We have a bank barn from the 1800s that has infestation with bugs. They're eating the wood, as well as a leak. The roof is leaking pretty severely, so it's causing some damage. And that is a very historical piece of property as well that we can't do as a council, but the county should be addressing. And I do work very closely with the Landmark Preservation Commission, so Terry Rising and that group is aware of it. But those are just 3 things that we as the just wanted to
No,
bring
thank
it.
you. And let me just say that, like, you should never apologize. Those small things are huge quality of life, and that's what differentiates an okay government or a good government from a great government, is that we're being responsive to little things, and we want to know about them. If a sign is taking 3 months, that's not acceptable. If we're not meeting basic needs like mowing, and that has, like, especially when it has those big implications for appetite, that matters, right? And I think that good governments are sensitive to that and respond to that, so we make sure we get all that.
Thank you. I mean, we don't ask for more than what we really need, but these are kind of situations that need to be addressed. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Hi, my name is Kathy Stoll. I live in Whitehall in the Hereford Zone. I love the Hereford Zone. Mr. Katz, you've been very helpful to me. You, your wife, Brian, everyone in your office has been wonderful. I'm here to speak about the animal shelter and the conditions and what's going on there. Specifically, Mr. Katz, you and I met when you were a delegate a long time ago at the Thoroughbred Valley. And we sat down and you explained to me that the shelter was going to become a public-private partnership, that the county health department, where Dr. Branch has proven that he does not care about the animals in Baltimore County, if he can't, the way to fix that is for it to become a public-private partnership, take it out of his control. This may sound harsh, sir, but I would like Dr. Jones fired.
Yes.
I would like Gary Klump fired. I would like Lauren Pavlik fired. I would like Will Webster fired. I have valid reasons for this, sir. Do you know what happened to the guinea pigs when they were sent to the state farm to be used as food? That's the tippity tip of the iceberg. There has been a lack of oversight. There has been fudging of animal intake statistics. There has been fraud, sir. There has been an abdication of animal welfare duties. There has been fraternization of management and lower level employees. I shouldn't know about the sex lives of the shelter employees, but I do. There's been a failure to manage. I saw a video where the person doing behavioral assessments of the shelter was introducing 2 pit bulls face to face. And I will tell you, that is not how it's done. You can get killed doing that. So that gentleman, I believe, is the person who called the snake farm to send the guinea pigs off to be fed live to snakes. Am I correct? So those people still have their jobs, Mr. Catch. Why in the world?
Well, in the paper I gave the county executive, I said that leadership of animal shelter should be
Tomorrow morning?
Well,
Will you make a commitment to fire these people? Who can?
let me ask you a quick question.
Sir.
The pigs, are they the ones from Dundalk?
Oh, the Dundalk pigs is a whole nother story, sir.
Are they the ones?
I'm talking about the guinea pigs that were fed to snakes,
Oh, okay.
or that were going to be fed to snakes.
I see.
Do you understand? I don't want to bore everybody with this. It's horrible what's going on in the animal shelter. Not to mention, sir, you told me they were going to build a new facility, which they did.
Right.
They won't let the women volunteers use the bathroom, sir. How absurd that we are told to go to another zip code to urinate. I implore you. It's wrong. Now, let me make sure I covered everything so I can let the other people speak. I guess that's about it. I have a veterinary oath that veterinarians agree to, I'm not going to read this because you know what it is, to be kind and humane, and we need a humane animal shelter. It needs to start tomorrow morning. Thank you.
So thank you. I take concerns that have been raised by reports by the advocates very seriously. We have, because of the concerns that advocates have raised, one of the first actions I took, we actually have a group called Operational Excellence. We have our OPEX team literally in the animal shelter now doing a 30-day review. They have been tasked to give me a report with recommendations. We charge them to include those recommendations, all options, including a private partnership, to examine the leadership structure, the practices, the policies, recommendations to move forward. And upon that report at the end of this month, we'll be moving forward with the restructuring changes as soon as that's done. So it's very serious. I take it very seriously. I know that I think a few in the room have met not only with me at some point, but also with folks who are my senior team as well. So we take it very seriously, and we will be taking action. Also imparted how important it is on this short list.
Good evening. My name is Sue Carlisle. I live near the Hereford Middle School in the Chesterfield community. I want to thank Councilman Catch because he has been out to see firsthand the problem that we want to draw some attention to. I'm here to speak to the problem of daily traffic in and out of Hereford Middle that presents significant safety concerns for the students, the bus drivers, cars, and residents, as it causes near paralysis of all traffic on Corbett New York Road and the surrounding community at the beginning and end of each day. I want to thank, as I said, I thank Councilman Patch. I also, some of our neighbors are here as well, so I'm not alone from the Chesterfield community. 5 elementary schools feed into Hereford Middle School, including Sparks, 5th and 7th District, Freeway Elementary, and a portion of the students in Jacksonville Elementary. Every one of these schools is built on a county numbered road or a state numbered road. This is the only one that is not. It was built on Corbett Road in 1978. And in 1995, it was doubled in size with no change to any of the physical or the access to the school. It's less than a half mile from York Road. It is a country road, Corbett Road. There are no sidewalks. It's a single lane of traffic in and out. There are no shoulders on Corbett Road. The only sidewalk is a very short one on the school property. The school educates over 1,000 students and is nearly at capacity. The land that the school sits on includes 3 tennis courts, a basketball court, 3 baseball diamonds, and a football field. The school has 106 parking spaces. 75 of those are taken up by the school personnel daily. More than 50 buses come into Corbett Road, this country road, and you've seen this yourself. And they arrive both in the morning and in the afternoon. In the morning, buses arrive at various times around 7 a.m. The school staff will only allow students into the building at 7:15. In addition, as many as 250 to 300 cars arrive to drop off students. Buses are sitting in the parking lot waiting until they can unload their students while the parents are driving in to drop off their children as close to 7:15 as possible. This totally blocks traffic on Corbett Road coming from York Road and also results in delays at the traffic light because traffic stacks up coming south on York Road and it blocks the drivers coming out of Piney Hill as well. In the afternoon at dismissal, there is no parking for additional cars. The buses line up on the school property, they're bumper to bumper, three wide, and they begin as early as 1:15 p.m. School dismissal is at 2 o'clock. Since they need to be in a certain order, buses are parked at any free spot they can find in Hereford. You can go up and down the road and you'll see them staged in the neighborhood. If they can't get onto the lot because they're not in order, those buses travel down to Chesterfield, which is about a quarter mile from the school, and make a 3-point U-turn, further blocking Corbett Road. The biggest problem for the students and neighbors is that parents start to arrive anywhere from 1 p.m. or later for a 2 p.m. dismissal. For cars picking up students, they cannot be on the school ground until 2:20. I'm getting hooked. I'm getting hooked. Okay. Well, all we can ask for is that this problem be addressed. It's been 20-some years in the making. The last time the governor was there, the county executive was there, and all we're asking is you not from the county executive that yours is this time.
I want to thank you very much. As you said, I have visited the site and I couldn't believe what I saw. I saw cars making a U-turn on Corbett Road. I can't believe there hasn't been a serious accident. Then I saw cars parked illegally. And then I saw, I think as many as 50 cars parked in the Chesterfield community. And so, when I had a meeting with the superintendent very recently and brought this to their attention. So, but if you go there in the afternoon, the buses totally, every parking, every road in front of that school is just full of buses. The principal has asked parents to please wait. If you're going to pick up your children and take them home, please wait until the buses come and leave, 2:20. But now, some people have to get there early, so, and it's really causing a problem, so real safety concern.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'll have to make sure we find time for you to come and see as well first.
Hey, just to remind everybody, 2 minutes, around 2 minutes. People have been going 5 minutes so far. If we keep going, everybody's not going to get to talk, and people in the back of the line are going to get cut off. That's just the reality. We have to be out at a certain time. So let's be respectful of one another. And we have our team here that's going to get all of your notes if you can't get everything out. So let's just be respectful of one another. Try to get your point across in a pretty quick manner, and we'll be following up with you. Thank you very much, and thanks for your understanding.
Councilman, County Executive, I found it in Coxville, I was born in Birmingham. I'm the grandfather of Delaney Gaddis, who was killed on July 23rd at Berwick Road, and her grandmother, Christian Kirk. And personally, thank all the Baltimore County police officers and first responders, who I think do an amazing job. I do know the community. I've talked to several people in that community. And the problem with Berwick Road has existed for a long, long time. It's been ignored. I know you're county executive, but to the detriment of the entire future of my family, which is devastated. My son is going to have a mother. My daughter lost her mother and her daughter, her only child, on that day in July. And we're totally devastated. Our lives, the lives that we have over there. So I'm asking, if you work with the community, I know Joe Hartnett and others in the community, that gentleman over there, have asked for certain things. I've walked many times, back on my knees, and prayed in the spots with the alley. And the traffic that I saw coming down that road at that time was horrendous. And this is after the accident, after it made modifications to the calming devices, and we put a sign, identify the speed people were going. I wasn't aware of the stop sign. I think that the stop sign, is it going to be a Gerwood and Traherne? I think there was, I lived in this area for a long time. I no longer live in the area, but there was a stop sign there before, and this accident would never happen if it was proper. Even as impaired as the driver was, it would never happen if there were those were in fact things the community was asking for years before because of that. So I'm depending on you to make a change and finally do something about it. Another comment I would make is our police officers, I think, in Baltimore County do an amazing job. This young lady who's impaired has a hit and run, July, February 23rd last year. That was my granddaughter's birthday. She failed to appear in court on June 19th. The good Baltimore County police officers arrested her on July 10th. She was arrested for failing to appear in court for that hit and run. A judge in Baltimore County released her on her own recognizance. And I would like you to find out who that judge was, and I don't know what options you had with Baltimore County judges. With that judge, 2 weeks later, my granddaughter and her grandmother are dead. Okay, we'll never return to the lives we had. My daughter is definitely, my daughter doesn't have a job. Her husband works for Baltimore County, but it's the police officers I hear, oh, we need more police presence. Well, the police officers are doing a good job. The first responders are doing a good job. But if we don't get the judges and the judiciary doing the right things, then it doesn't do any good. The police officers can do all they want, they can arrest, but why this person, I would like to know why this person was released from their own recognizance. They have a horrendous record of DUIs, hit and runs, failure to appear in court, and a slap on the hand for that? Does she know someone? Is she connected? That's what I would like to know. But in the interest of all the people in the community, especially on Burwood Road, the traffic is horrible, and I never want to have any family go through what we did.
Thank you for. I'm so sorry to hear your loss. No family should have to endure that, and I think you hit the nail on the head. One of the most frustrating things about the whole experience of coming to the community meeting afterwards was that the community had been advocated, and if there had been more proactive action, we could have very likely avoided it. And so, my pledge is that that's why these conversations are so important, frankly, so that we are partnering with the community in ways that we understand the community says these are our needs, that we're meeting them. And so that's my pledge to honor the legacy of Lainey and her grandmother. I can't do anything more than that. You are owed that. As it relates to the judicial system, it's a separate branch of government, so I don't have any, we're sort of autonomous. I don't have any control over that. But what we can control, what we can do, you got my word, we'll do everything we can to honor that by making it right in the community there and across all.
Thank you, Chuck.
And I just wanted to clarify, this county executive has honored every request regarding Birdwood, and there's more that needs to be done in Spring Lake, Coachford. But we do have a partner in this county executive, with this county executive.
That's good. Thank you, sir.
I wanted to say to the previous speaker that I'm sorry for his loss, and I feel like a jerk talking about schools, but that's what I'm for. My name is Suzanne Prasad, and I'm a Lock Raven and Ridgely parent. I'm a sophomore and a senior at Lock Raven and a sixth grader at Ridgely. Really hadn't done a talk tonight, so I had lots of cross-outs, so I hope that it all makes sense. But I'm really disheartened as to hear that school projects are being pushed out, since I've been involved in school projects since my oldest was in, I don't know, second grade or something like that, since elementary school. So it seems like every step of the way is just a stinking fight. And I realize there are not enough resources, hopefully less politics involved, that things can get done. But it seems ridiculous that we're still doing this. And especially, I know there are a lot of your constituents that, their kids, they have kids in the school system, or they have kids in other school systems, or they don't have kids, or maybe their kids are grown, but that shouldn't matter. Like, all of us should be worried about this. Our home prices are contingent upon it, crime is contingent upon it, whether people need to use government resources later is dependent on it. And so if there are people out there that think, look at me, it does. And I would hope that, you don't have to get up here and talk about it, but I hope that everyone is open to hearing the fact, and like other people whose kids are already grown, they don't have to worry about it, but I didn't, like, one day I'll grow, my kids will be grown. It doesn't seem possible, but I've heard it happens. Anyway, so my first point is just that the future of our communities hinge on the quality of our educational system, which is something that we talked about when you were campaigning. And home values are directly tied to quality schools. We have a realtor here, like, isn't that the first question people ask you? How are the schools? Our area is lucky because Evan Hammond has spent $1.3 billion on our schools, but unfortunately there's still addressing our issues. So, I mean, I'm here to urge you guys to, fund education. It's no secret that teachers need more money. They're underpaid. Sorry, my mouth is dry. Like the schools need more money, teachers need more money, and the reason I came is Black Raven High School doesn't have enough technology courses. It's a small school, get it, but my kids want to go into cybersecurity, and there are basic courses that are not there for them. C++, basic, the only other course for them to have taken was Microsoft Word. Yeah, I can see that. That doesn't, that's not really the same thing. And also, so not only are there not in those classes, but in terms of courses in general, there are not enough. My kid is a senior. He could literally not fill his entire day with courses. So he's a teacher's aide and a rec leader and leaves class early. They literally do not have enough classes. And the guidance counselor told me, we do not have enough classes in the afternoon for seniors. And it seems like seniors are being pushed out the door in the afternoon. Are being pushed out the door in the afternoon and put on classes. So anyway, and Delaney Valley, I believe the meeting was supposed to be there today, but it's in such bad shape. Okay, it wasn't. It's in terrible shape. I have no kids there. I have no skin in the game. It's horrible.
Thank you. Let me just say, I'm a teacher. My heart, my passion is in classroom. Even though I'm not in it anymore, a councilman, a teacher. We want to find ways to make those investments because they're important. You mentioned the 1.6 billion. Part of the challenge is that money was borrowed from the schools, but there was never any real plan to pay for it. And so now we're sort of paying for what was already borrowed, and then recognizing that there are incredible needs still that need to be done, and we need to do that too. So just bringing the community together to find ways to do that. But we are committed to trying to find ways to do it.
This district is represented by Catherine Causey on the school board. She is the chair of the school board, and they are meeting tonight, which is why she can't be here. But the thing that we're advocating for is that with the planning money that is proposed by somebody next to me, that they'll be planning money for the high schools. I think that's very important.
Good evening. My name is Glenn Resnick, and I'm honored to be here tonight to represent more than 3,000 men and women of the Baltimore County Volunteer Firemen's Association. These men and women put their lives on the line for this county every day of the week. And I'm very passionate about the volunteer fire service and the fire service in general in Baltimore County. I'm also here and honored to represent the Upper Cove Volunteer Fire Company. They're the ones with the big blue fire truck sitting out front. So, 4.5 years ago, the Baltimore County Volunteer Firemen's Association hired VFIS to do a comprehensive study for the entire volunteer fire service in Baltimore County. All the stations participated, Baltimore County government participated, and the fire chief at the time participated in this endeavor. It took over a year, and it was a very comprehensive report, 200 pages long. This report was presented to the county executive's office at the time. It was presented to the entire Baltimore County Council, and many of which are still serving today. Some of the highlights of this report were the 33 fire stations and 2 rehab units saved the Baltimore County taxpayers $60 million a year annually. I want to repeat that. These men and women, for what they do, save the county taxpayers $60 million annually. The report validated the Baltimore County Volunteer Firemen's Association push for Baltimore County to start EMS billing, which now generates $27.1 million of revenue for Baltimore County General Fund. It also identified major infrastructure problems with the buildings and the facilities that were housed in. And it also recommended, the big part was that some of these volunteer fire companies should consolidate to make our fire service stronger. Two of these companies were the Arcadia Volunteer Fire Company and the Boring Volunteer Fire Company. They put their wheels in motion and started their consolidation process. I'm here to tell you it was one of the most successful consolidations of corporations I've ever seen, and it set the example of excellence of how a corporation should follow a consolidation. They formed the Upper Cove Volunteer Fire Company and did everything they could to meet the expectations of the Baltimore County Fire Department and Baltimore County Volunteer Firemen Association. In turn, Upper Cove was told that the assistance with the new building would be assured by Baltimore County. The county executive at the time allotted $3 million in the FY 2018 budget to assist volunteer fire companies that had consolidated and help them with construction costs. The BCBFA was so successful on this, we had 11 companies embark in this endeavor. The county executive then in 2019, we made that fund a $4 million fund, which we were gratefully appreciative of. The Upper Cove Volunteer Fire Company existing fire station was rated by VFIS at the time in poor condition. Since then, it is in deteriorating condition. Councilman Katz, I was honored to be with him last week. We were at the station to validate the need for a new facility. The amount of money to make the current building livable, and I would say, use that term loosely, for the next couple of years would be enormous and would be financially irresponsible to Baltimore County and the company's own finances. Upper Cove provides an invaluable emergency service to Northwest Baltimore County. They are located in the far northwest corner of Baltimore County. Upper Cove has one of the largest response areas in Baltimore County, while having the furthest distance away from a career Arcadia fire station. The closest one is 9.4 miles to the south, and the second closest one is 14.9 miles to the east. At this point, we're looking for assurance from Baltimore County that they will back the Upper Cove Volunteer Fire Company as promised on this huge endeavor. Upper Cove Volunteer Fire Company is now ready to move forward with a new building project. The Upper Cove Volunteer Fire Company has been told that they have the support of both the BCBFA and the Baltimore County Fire Department. We're looking to the county executive to see what our next direction is to get a hold and a piece of the money that was promised to them. And again, we thank you for your support. I just want to say that I always take the opportunity to thank our delegation, our state delegation. I see Delegate Hellman, the support to the volunteer fire service in the state of Maryland, particularly in Baltimore County, $1.7 million. Our hats off to you. Keep doing that because we need it. And our county council who supports our budget annually. And I got to say, our new county executive, John Eo, had the opportunity to meet with you, as you know. And what you said, I want to validate to the people here the transparency, the collaboration, openness, to willing to talk with us. I can't thank you enough. So thank you. While we have any of the volunteer firefighters in the building, please stand.
I just want to let you know that in regards to Upper Cove, I've and the others talking about renovation and replacing. Upper Cove has already spent $500,000 of their own money buying land and getting, they want to know, do we go to the next step and hire an architect and spend another $500,000? So that's why there needs to be some clarity in regard to whether or not they're going to be able to borrow the funds necessary to complete this fire station.
And the grant that was allotted in the budget, so it's there. We want to just find out. I know things are tight, but that money was there. It's in this current budget, so that's what they're asking for.
Great.
All right, thank you.
I'm going to channel my inner TJ and just remind everyone that we need to start making our way out here by 9. So this is the time check. It is almost 8 o'clock. And we really want to make sure that everyone's in line. I want to make sure I hear from everyone. So we can try to keep it as succinct as possible.
Good evening. My name is Eric Bravo, and I want to make a few brief points. First, with regard to traffic calming, this is something, as you know, Mr. Shesky, that plagues many neighborhoods, not just in the 3rd District, but every district. I hope and encourage the county that somewhere during your term, they will have Public Works do a comprehensive study and compare its methods with methods in other jurisdictions and give the public a chance to comment about the differences between the two. Secondly, and we've already heard from the great volunteer fighters here tonight, but you have a real gem in Baltimore County with many volunteer organizations that participate in many ways, whether it be the Arvin Rich Nature Council, whether it be the Ag Center Resource Council, one group that I'm involved with, Makerspace of Baltimore County, and I just encourage your administration to nurture and develop stronger ties with all of the volunteer organizations. And the reason is very simple. It's value added at very little, in many cases, no cost to Baltimore County. They do that. Thirdly, I want to commend you for introducing that legislation regarding ethics and accountability. That's deeply needed. Let me point out one case that I hope will be looked at some point in the future. Neighborspace of Baltimore County, in conjunction with the home builders and the county council, worked on legislation to change the local open space laws in Baltimore County 2 years ago. There's many pieces of that legislation that still have not been implemented by the administration, including a new local open space manual for the builders to comply with, changes in the fees that are collected for waiver of local open space fees. So that's just the sort of thing that, for me, accountability needs to address. Lastly, and I know I'm not speaking to the choir because I've got 2 former teachers in front of me here, but I want to put your slide in the PowerPoint presentation regarding teacher salaries in a little bit of context. First off, I don't begrudge any teacher their step increases or longevity increases, that sort of thing. But Baltimore County really isn't as bad off in one context as that slide would make us see. The context is, if you look at the median household income of all those jurisdictions, Baltimore County is actually the lowest median household income if we throw out Baltimore City. And Baltimore County is actually closest in the salary to the median household income as compared with the others. Baltimore County is about a $6,500 difference between median family income and teacher salary. Howard County, which is the highest median income, is over a $40,000 disparity between its household income and teachers. So Baltimore County teachers are not doing as terribly bad in comparison on that statistic. Thank you.
All right, I see we have a couple of people who've been to every town hall, and as I always say, be respectful of the individuals in this district and give them the mic. So your comments will be limited to 2 minutes, and now have a time point.
Hi, I'm Mark Baskerville. I'm with the Baltimore County Campaign for Liberty. I have been in every town hall meeting, and I was also one of the 2 people who testified at the budget hearing. So I just wanted to talk about, we're against tax increases. We want to impose spending discipline on the county. And we also are in support of expanded parental options regarding schools. And I don't think there has to be a fight between taxpayers and schools. So we have currently, according to the fiscal year 18 Baltimore County Public School adjusted budget, it was $1.838 billion. The entire county's tax collection is less than that, including income taxes and property taxes combined. For that fiscal year 18, $1.783 billion. The average spending per student in Baltimore County schools is roughly around $14,000. I've seen some different variations about that. There's many private schools that have less than half of that for their tuition costs. So my suggestion would be opening up some sort of tax credit or voucher system to parents to save the county schools money, and also, allow families and parents to have more financial ability to opt into a private system. And that would take a whole lot of burden off of the public schools. It would alleviate overcrowding problems, and it would just expand everybody's opportunities, and it would protect taxpayers. And if you're not aware, in the developing world, in the third world, low-cost private schools are a huge phenomenon that have lifted people out of ignorance, lifted people out of poverty, and these are the poorest people on the planet that are paying out of their own pockets for private schools. So schools do not have to cost anywhere close to what they're costing through our government system right now. So if you're in favor of expanded parental choice over education dollars and preventing tax hikes, please come talk to me. Please come check out the Baltimore County Campaign for Liberty. Thank you, TJ.
Thank you, and I'll see you at the rescheduled one.
Hello, my name is Mike Farley from Hempstead, Baltimore County. More what you guys are to do about the Secretary of the county, state, not the state, county. They're taking jobs from citizens that need jobs, and you already said we're going to have higher taxes. These people will be able to have jobs in their community and pay taxes that you could use for the school teachers, the kids. We have illegals basically draw a lot of money from the coffers, health, medical, whatever. School teachers got to teach they don't speak English, won't speak English, which draws away that teacher from a child, my grandchild, might need help. Okay? And the next thing I'd like to understand, do you believe in rule of law? It's like, I have to follow the law in this state, this county, but yet you allow them to come in here and break the law and do nothing. Why do I have to follow the laws? Your jails and prisons are full of people. I'm not talking to you, sir. Excuse me. I'm irrespectful. You don't have to attack me. Anyhow, they come here and they disrespect our rules, disrespect our culture. Your prisons are full of people that didn't mean to break the law, but they're in jail. We need to stop this influx of people. We've got plenty of young people, middle-aged people, old people that need these jobs and pay the taxes that we need for our county. So I'd like to know what you're going to do about that. Second, the free stuff, free college. Are you going to give me a rebate for $300,000 I put after my kids to go to school? Where am I going to get something free? I didn't get none of them scared. Hey, first of all, sir, excuse me.
Hey!
Hold on. So that's what I want to know is, are we going to do something about the influx of illegals in our county, which are breaking the law? They're not citizens. They stay in line like people do, pay the fees. All they do is cost us money.
Time's up.
Sorry?
I said time's up, sir.
You're not retired. What is it?
We're gonna all be respectful. So
I am respectful. I'm talking to you. These people are wrong.
so let's talk. Look, I think you and I have a fundamental disagreement on some of our policy.
I'm sure you do. You're
And I think we can be respectful about
I
that.
am respectful. I didn't know.
We're having a conversation. So, from my perspective, I do believe in rule of law, and the federal law tells me, and the teacher in me, and frankly, the parent in me tells me that I need to educate and take care of children. So that's what I'm going to do with Baltimore County.
Children,
Executive.
what part?
Children. Period.
Children.
Children. These are children. Sir. And look, why don't we set up a conversation?
I'd like to.
We'll talk
I really
more.
would. Like, people, I don't like conservatives, that's fine. But I like to talk to you one-on-one. I really like to. I want to be disrupted by
No. Thank you for coming out. Thank you.
Thanks.
We have fun yet?
My name is Eric Vandenbeek. I'm with the Baltimore County Recreation and Parks Board. Tonight I'm speaking to you as a resident of northern Baltimore County. I've been involved with recreation activities for almost 40 years now, and you probably remember me because I was the guy that listed the candidates for up in Hereford back in April of last year. At that meeting, we talked about the fact that Baltimore County has over 150 parks, 100 of which have either outdoor fields or indoor facilities. Northern Baltimore County has not been good north of Shalon Road. There's nothing there. So as a result, the residents there either have to pay outlandish fees to rent facilities, and that's limited, or faced with the prospect of eliminating recreation programs, which we have done. So my question is, at the end of that presentation, you, along with the others, stated that you would support making a park in northern Baltimore County a reality and make it a priority item. And I'm asking if you still believe that.
Yes.
Good evening, my name is Susan Bath, I live in Kearney. I'm the co-chair of the Jennifer Branch Conservation Association of the Gunpowder Valley Conservancy. The GBC board is meeting tonight, so we're here, but they're asking me to speak on behalf of the Jennifer Branch group. And although I'm not representing the Kearney Improvement Association or the Greater Parkville Community Council, they have always endorsed our aims that I would like to address tonight. A few years ago, the county recognized the importance of the Jennifer Branch to the health of gunpowder and to the bay. They invested a great deal of money in upgrading the banks of the branch just north of Joppa Road and on the east side of Hartford Road. However, the headwaters of the Jennifer Branch are on the west side of Hartford Road, immediately adjacent to the Kearney Park and Ride. As Councilman Catch has observed, and thank you for your interest in this issue, the conditions of the park and ride are deplorable. The lighting is poor, there are inadequate shafts, receptacles, crumbling bus shelter, and deteriorating parking lot surface that make it a real blight on the community. And the lot's proximity to the branch and the debris that tumbles into the stream from the lot exacerbates the already deteriorating condition of the headwaters of the branch, in spite of the efforts of many faithful volunteers to keep it clean. We would endorse proposals to repair and clean up both the Kearney Park and Ride and the headwaters of the Jennifer Branch to include removal of invasive species and improvements to the banks of the stream. So much was done on the east side, such an investment, and we would like to see that undermined. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be sure to follow up with thanks to
And that's, we talked about that on both subjects on Friday, which reminds me, the state delegates that are here, there's a bus shelter that's in Harlow shape, and I think that's state. So if you could look into that, see if we can do something about it, and that the lot is horrible. The headwaters of the Jennifer Branch are, it's disgusting. Now, I did something really odd during the rezoning. I rezoned that RC, rural conservation, even though it's in the middle of Kearney, because this is very environmentally sensitive, so it needs to be cleaned up.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Barbara Willett, and I live in Moncton. Mr. County Executive, like you, I was a teacher for Baltimore County. My last 2 years of my 34 years were also Dallas Dance's first 2. I'm reminded of Dr. Dance's downfall in leadership as I join the animal advocates who want to make clear what has happened with our county's animal control. Thank you, Councilman Catch and Delegate Guyton, for making yourselves aware of the situation. My part of the story begins in 1977 and lasts for 40 years because my husband holds the record for longest employment ever at what is now called Baltimore County Animal Services. Not many can last for 40 years as a leader, as he did, in this very challenging field, and certainly the current management, in our opinions, will not and should not
The animals euthanized are falsely presented to you. The euthanasia numbers have been lowered, not by following best practices at all, but by eliminating long-standing services to the public, such as handling calls for wildlife, little old ladies with bats in their houses. Their taxes should help them out with that. And handling complaints for animals running at large. The county's force of professional animal control officers of the law, about 10 of them, is now down to 1, and he's going to retire. 1/3 of the workforce now works for other county animal controls. They're gone. That talent that is gone totaled about 200 years of service to the county in that field is now gone. These professionals have been replaced with non-professional, non-merit, and untrained service personnel. This isn't how it's done in our country. Our animal control officers worked with the SWAT team. They were there for raids when there were dog fighting raids. They were there for drug raids. They're there for murders. Because believe me, when there's a crazed animal inside with the murdered man, the popo doesn't want to go in first. You know, animal control does. There's plenty of other things that aren't happening now. Animals running at large are not being serviced, and I know you know a lot about this, but I witnessed the animal services side in the field as these volunteers have seen what is in the shelter. It's bad in both places. And County Executive, the leash has now been handed to you, and we await your answers. Thank you so much for listening.
To be funny, because it isn't funny, but about 2 years ago, I went to visit the animal shelter, and the 2 people who are in charge asked me to leave. And I am not a nasty person. I was not confrontational at all. That they did not want me to see what was there. It was totally unacceptable.
So, hi, my name is Phoebe Evans-Latosha, and I'm an advocate for a transparent, open planning process for Towson High School. I'm here to ask about impact fees. So when I look at the stark fiscal realities that we are facing, I ask, how did we get here? At these town halls I've been to a few because Towson High is represented by 4 different council districts. I'm hearing a lot about quality of life issues, the roads that aren't paved, the overcrowded and aging schools, the sewers that are polluting the environment in the Chesapeake Bay, the lack of senior centers, the need for more resources for our fire stations. These are all quality of life issues. So why aren't we charging impact fees? Well, part of that is because Baltimore County doesn't have the authority from the state of Maryland to do that. Last week, Baltimore County delegation heard testimony in Annapolis in support of legislation to give Baltimore County the authority to charge impact fees, and I was pleased to hear that our county executive has voiced his support for this legislation, which is supported by Senator Chris West, by Delegate Steve Lafferty, by Shelley Kettleman, by Michelle Guyton, David Marks, and Kathy Bevins at the District 6 Town Hall also voiced her support for that. So development impact fees would enable local governments to collect revenue from builders for the public facilities necessitated by new residential or commercial development. As a result of these development charges, local governments are able to shift the cost of financing new public facilities from existing taxpayers to individuals responsible for development. The Department of Legislative Services analysis of this exact same bill that was submitted last year indicated that Baltimore County imposes impact fees similar to Anne Arundel or Prince George's County. Baltimore County revenues may increase by $15 to $30 million annually. So why didn't we do that back in 2005 when we had the opportunity. How much money have we left on the table? In addition, how much money have we, the taxpayers, been funding to improve the roads for the new developments, to improve the sewers? Why are our roads and sewers and schools in such bad shape? Because there's been deferred maintenance. That money has gone to developers like Kings Valley Partners, $42 million, and it hasn't gone to So when we hear there's no money for roads, schools, infrastructure, we're paying for that. The developers need to pay their fair share too. So I've heard from County Executive Olszewski that he supports this legislation. So my question is for Councilman Koch, is that if the impact fee authorization legislation is successful, would you support Baltimore County actually imposing impact fees?
At this point, no. And let me explain why. The council has lunch every 2 weeks. This bill came up for discussion, and there are 2 members of the county council who are currently in conversations with the home builders, and the home builders want, in exchange, to move the Earl. Moving the Earl, do you know what Earl is?
Yeah, I know what Earl is.
Move the Earl, which...
It's an urban-rural demarcation
Yeah,
law.
it's for more development, in other words, if you can build.
But you don't have to give into that. You don't have to give into that.
No, I don't. That's exactly right, and I won't give into it. But when you see how northern Baltimore County continues to be threatened, I mean, it's all the time. Northern Baltimore County provides everyone drinking water. We do everything we can to keep it clean, preserve the soil so we can grow food. And every time I turn around, there's something going on that is going to jeopardize all that we've done to try to preserve northern Baltimore County. And I can assure you, I will never vote for impact fees if there's any agreement by the majority members by the majority of the council that they will go along with expanding the Earl. Never.
So what do we do to make sure that we maintain and protect the Earl and charge impact fees so the developers pay their fair share? We're paying for that
now. What you've got to do is you've got to get commitments from
the other
council members that they will not support moving the Earl.
So who do we need to talk to?
You can tell I'm very emotional about this because it's a big deal. So we get into the members of the council.
I know, yeah. So who do we need to talk to about protecting the Earl and charging impact fees? Who do we need to target?
I would all 6.
Okay.
Okay. All
Thank
6.
you. Yeah, because that's $15 to $30 million a year.
No, I understand that, but I'm not going to do the trade.
Yeah.
I'm
And
not
I
doing
wouldn't
the
ask you to
trade.
do the trade, but
Not doing it.
we need
I understand. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bill Felder, and I'm the president of the Baltimore County Skateboard Council. We're the most recent addition to the network of Baltimore County Recreation Councils. We represent the interests of thousands of Baltimore County skateboarders and their families. Our goal as a rec council is to improve, expand, and modernize Baltimore County's outdated skate parks and to promote skateboarding as a fun, healthy activity for all ages, races, and genders. I'm here tonight to say a few words about our rec council and how we look to improve the county's skate parks for the next generation of Baltimore County skateboarders. The 3rd district is home to Cockeysville Skate Park, arguably the county's most popular and well-attended. It was built in 2003 thanks to the efforts of the Baltimore County Skateboard Solutions Committee, a group not unlike ours, that saw the overwhelming need for safe places to skateboard in local communities. They worked with then County Executive Jim Smith to create 3 all-new skate parks. The first new skate parks built in Baltimore County since the construction of St. Hill Skate Park in 1979. For 15 years, these skate parks have faithfully served Baltimore County skateboarders and their families and have been the place where many of the area's best skateboarders first learned how to push, turn, and ollie. Regrettably, these skate parks, which are comprised of modular steel ramps and obstacles, placed on a rapidly decaying asphalt parking lot are reaching the end of their service life. Other than periodic repainting, the skate parks have seen very little in the way of upkeep and maintenance. In fact, the asphalt at Cockeysville Skate Park, home to the county's only summer skateboarding camp, is now in such bad shape that Gary Smith, the skate camp's organizer, is considering eliminating this long-standing program due to the difficulty of teaching young children how to skateboard in such poor conditions. While our council is advocating for the construction of modern concrete skate parks, we recognize that our existing skate parks are still filling an important need. And even though Cockeysville is outdated by modern standards, that doesn't mean it should be scrapped. There are still skateboarders using the park every day that it's open, and the Baltimore County Skateboard Council is asking the county executive to make available funds from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources program Open Space, which provides money to enhance and rehabilitate parks to perform necessary and long overdue maintenance, including repaving and purchasing some new equipment at Cockeysville Skate Park and at our 2 pilot programs in Towson and Kaysville. With little makeover, Cockeysville Skate Park can still serve the community's needs while we work toward our goal of creating a world-class skate park in time for the Summer Olympics in 2020, when skateboarding will be featured as an Olympic event for the first time. In addition, we ask that the county executive work with the Office of Law and Department of Recreation and Parks to amend the existing skate park rules to bring them into line of those with neighboring jurisdictions. As they stand now, Baltimore County skate park rules are the most stringent in the state, and we believe that amending the rules will result in a marked and immediate increase in the number of skiers using the facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. And we missed it last time. So just again, a time check is 8:25. We're going to cut off our last speaker on this side. Say hi, everybody. Our last speaker on this side, sir. You're good? Okay. So we're going to cut off. Senator Della. All right.
Hi, my name's Tariki. I'm a resident of Parkton, and I grew up in Cockeysville. I'm a proud graduate of Baltimore County Public Schools. I'm married to a teacher at Cockeysville Middle School. My children are at Pretty Boy and at Cockeysville Middle School. And I would just like to add my voice to the chorus that is urging you to find the money to pay our teachers and find the money to fund our schools. Our children are our legacy. They are all of our children. They are also our future, and they are a reflection of what we do for our schools is a reflection of what we believe about kids. So we need to muscle up, dig deep, find it, and all of us, I would urge all of us to commit to that, to commit to spending for our children. Whether you have children that go to school, whether you don't have children, our kids support us. Our kids make our communities healthy. So we are your concern, even if you don't have children. I would also say that I disagree with my neighbor who said that having lower income in general in Baltimore County means it's okay to have lower teacher income in Baltimore County. I find that we will lose our teachers. We will lose our teachers to the counties next door. We will lose our professionals who have experience, and our kids will suffer for that.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm Liz Entwistle, and I live in Jacksonville, Baltimore County. We've heard a lot about the needs of our county, schools, traffic calming, police presence, environmental protection, the federal mandates too on the bay restoration and
You need a job as a community outreach.
water and sewer, and the list goes on and on. This is what we've been hearing about tonight. And I got a sort of a debriefing from somebody who's been attending the Commission on Fiscal Sustainability meetings. And correct me if I've got this wrong, but what I heard was that the looming deficit of, I believe it's $81 million.
That's just next year's budget.
For next year, right, just for one fiscal year, is threatening to downgrade our credit with credit agencies, which of course is going to make borrowing more expensive. And this has been attributed to growing population in the county, growing service demands, and correct me if I've got this one wrong, no new taxes since 1986. So, and I know that your administration is looking under every seat cushion and looking for every efficiency and trying to tighten up on the legacy programs that may not have the relevance they had years ago, et cetera. But at the end of the day, I want to say, as a resident myself and a taxpayer, I support developer fees. I think that developers should be paying their way for the added capacity that will be needed because of the development that they've put in, in terms of schools and roads, et cetera. And I will also say that I, as a resident and a taxpayer, am willing to pay more taxes if that is what it takes.
Let me just say that my property taxes have gone up every single year. The rates stayed the same, but the assessment on the house, so, yeah, it's not that taxes have never been raised, they go up every year. So, yeah, I'm just clear, I get tired of people, well, the rate's been the same, we're not changing the rate, so therefore we're not raising taxes. Well, guess what? We are, because I can tell you that, again, my property tax, our property tax is on every single year.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Yara Sheikh, and I am the PTA president at Ridgely Middle School and a co-founder of Friends of Delaney High School. I've been an education advocate for 12 years, and what we desperately needed is a long-term strategic plan. The Delaney community has been advocating for a new high school for 5 years. I want to thank both of you, County Executive for coming to visit during the campaign, Councilman Koch for ardent, constant support of a replacement school at Delaney High School. But we need a long-term facility plan, and we need it because the Delaney community needs to know, where are we? We are the second worst high school in Baltimore County without a funded solution, and we need to be addressed. Our school is unsafe. We've had electrical fields catch on fire. We have weekly, if not daily, leaks in different parts of the building, not to mention our groundwater, our settlement issues in the newest part of the building, and we lack air conditioning, and we have a 54-year-old electrical panel that is only aging. Life expectancy of that panel was 30 years. It's not safe. And so when I say that, Councilman Koch, please vote to raise taxes to pay for schools. Impact fees. I testified last Friday for impact fees. I want impact fees. But what does it say about our county? That our county council members are already negotiators with the developers and the Home Builders Association to compromise. What does that say? So I am with you, Councilman Koch, for impact fees that aren't negotiated. I'm with you. And I thank Delegate Guyton and I thank Delegate Hellman. But there isn't enough money. If we find savings from the SCAT program, Ridgely Middle School's budget, the internal budget, what the principal had to spend on our students, has been reduced over the last 6 years, 11% every year. That's how SCAT got paid for. It wasn't new funding. It was internally cutting into the BCPS budget. So we all felt the effects. It was staffing. It was school budgets. It was special education. So there are no savings in that budget. There is a need to reallocate them back into the school system, into our staff, and into COLA, and to all the things that make our school system work. And it hasn't been working. And so we need to improve it. So there are no savings. There's just reallocation of funding if you find them. So I would ask everyone to please consider raising taxes and do it for FY 2020, because we can't wait to solve our school issues. Thank you. Oh, I am the daughter of immigrants. When they are well educated,
I just wanted to touch one of the things, because otherwise I won't make sure everyone doesn't get a chance to speak. I will make sure that the long-term planning money is in the BCPS budget will be funded in my budget. So we will have a long-term plan for our schools.
And I can assure you this will be a long-term plan that we all can rely on, because again, we have an open and transparent administration. We have not had one for many, many years. So whatever the plan is, you can bank on it. And I just think that's
Good evening. I am, forgive me, I'm very nervous, a longtime county resident, what is now 42B. So the last speaker, thank you, raised the question of why the council members are already in negotiation with the developers. That's because their campaign funds come from developers. So I call upon anyone campaigning for county council to refuse donations, campaign donations from developers. It does not need to be one or the other. It does not need to be a compromise. Those impact fees, instead of campaign donations, those developers can support the impact fees. That's a very straightforward solution. There's been a lot of discussion this evening about traffic calming, and public transit needs to be part of that conversation. The residents of the Baltimore region deserve autonomy when it comes to solutions for traffic calming that include public transit. So I'm grateful that delegates Guyton and Heddleman are here this evening because there is already a bill in the Maryland State Legislature for the study of a regional transit authority so that residents of the Baltimore region don't have to rely on any gubernatorial administration, any governor's administration, or beg the state for transportation funding. So I'm calling upon delegates Guyton and Heddleman to support the legislation that would study the need and the benefits of an RTA. Please, thank you for being here. You need efficient public transit as part of the traffic calming efforts to achieve a clean, green Baltimore County before it's too late. Thank you.
I just want to say that the problem of campaign contributions is real. It's real in this county. And I think the county executive is putting in a bill to allow for public financing of elections. I have never supported that ever. But seeing the situation that we have in Baltimore County, I think this is the way we need to go.
Four more votes and we'll be here about 2020.
Good evening. I'm Leslie Grant. I have been a more than 20-year resident of gloriously picturesque Glen Arm. And had it not been for about 6 months ago, I would be really here talking with you about school zone. My son is a 2015 graduate of Delaney. I would be affirming everything that's been said tonight about the schools. However, I want you to know, thank you so much for having these forums. I hope that they continue next year, that you'll continue this, and I hope that you encourage others in your administration, such as your health officer, to do something similar throughout the county. It would be beneficial for all.
This doesn't count against your time, I promise. After these town halls for the budget, we're gonna convert over the course of the years. It's been pretty wild trying to do this in like 6 weeks, but we're gonna do a cabinet and community series where we actually it's less about me and more about engaging with the administration and cabinet level folks so those issues can be addressed directly.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Councilman Cash knows what I'm going to talk about. I want to thank Joanne and his office. She has been marvelous. We have danger in Baltimore County. I'm going to repeat it. We have danger in Baltimore County. Old Bosley Road, we had a storm in July, and Old Bosley Road and a lot of the watershed and wooded areas were impacted. In August, I noticed that wires that had been tied to a guardrail were still tied, and I called my councilman's office to ask, when is this going to, take care of? And there was no answer. Why? Because no one knew, and I was sent back and forth between the city and the county. Oh, that's not on our land. This is on their land. This is on our land. This is on our land. You now have the email stream from August. You can copy it. And so, and then it was, oh, it's BG&E. No, it's Comcast. No, it's Verizon. These flyers were the last time I was on Delaney Valley Road. It was right before it closed. I'm sorry, Old Bosley Road. It was right before it closed in January, and wires were still tied to for me is not only was I sent from place to place, and I'm not done, because there's still some unanswered questions. I testified before the county council back in September. So this is an ongoing issue. The reason I say we have danger in Baltimore County is there is no mechanism that I have been able to get an answer from Department of Public Works in terms of shared jurisdictional areas, particularly in the watershed, when there is a problem, such as wires being down. If someone from one jurisdiction notes the problem is on the other jurisdiction's side, they have evidently no obligation or no individual to communicate that to it. That is just flat out wrong. And look at the emails, you will see there is no responsibility taken, there's no coordination, no communication. We have bridges, we have roadways, we have waterways that we share with other jurisdictions. This is a major problem and a potential for danger. I appreciate your consideration. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Lauren Berger. I'm an 8th grade student at Hopkins Middle. And I was hoping to speak about bullying. So, well, actually, we have devices. Every student has a device. And if you break it, they said it's approximately like $1,600. So, I feel that like we should have moved towards priorities, such as high schools. We don't have like proper water for so, yeah.
So you think we can prioritize things above the staff program?